Hey, what's going on, guys? And welcome to an emergency, an emergency episode of the American Hotspur. And of course, the big news today: Spurs chairman Daniel Levy has stepped down after 25 years in charge. His stewardship comes to an end. And to be honest with you, man, I got to be honest with you. I'm a little bummed because, yeah, I mean, 25 years in one position is absolutely insane today in modern sports. But that being said, I think you guys know where I stand on this one. I was never really a Levy out type of guy because I recognized what his stewardship brought to the club. Now, I understand the opposite side of the argument, and we're going to get into that because I understand it completely. But that being said, in this new age of football, where revenue is everything, right? I mean, let's keep it honest, right? Football runs off of television revenue, and the smartest teams in the world know how to impact their own revenue. And Daniel Levy was an absolute wizard with that. And there's a reason why Tottenham Hotspur went from a franchise that wasn't even worth 100 billion pounds, and all of a sudden now it's worth 3.5 billion pounds 25 years later. And so we're going to get into all of that on this episode. Before we do, please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons because this channel is growing exponentially, and I'd love to have you on board. And also check me out on social media, by the way. There they are right there on X at Stateside Footy, and of course on TikTok at Stateside Footy. And I love talking football, so head on over there and say what's up, man. All right, so Daniel Levy, no more. And it was interesting because I work in mid-Michigan, and even from mid-Michigan, I heard that thunderous roar, that thunderous cheer from North London as Daniel Levy announced that he was stepping down as chairman. I'm sure there were a lot of fans that were shedding tears of joy. And the reality is, man, he was probably the best chairman this club has ever had. And I understand from the Levy out perspective, I really do. Certainly, there were more successful eras on the pitch. You know, when the club was owned by Fred Behrman in the early 60s and Bill Nick was the head coach of this team, yeah, clearly on the pitch, Spurs, they won a double in 61, right? So, yeah, clearly that period was like the height of Spurs football. So, yeah, there's different generations and different ownership groups that had far more success on the pitch than Daniel Levy. But Daniel Levy's success is understanding the landscape of where football was going and capitalizing it. Again, Spurs, when they bought Spurs, it was barely worth 80 million pounds. And when he stepped down as chairman, by the way, he's still an owner. But when he stepped down as a chairman, the club was worth 3.5 billion pounds. That shit doesn't happen if you're stupid. It just does not happen like that way. And I understand from the Levy out perspective. I clearly understand it. We weren't aggressive enough in player acquisitions. Totally understand it. We had a 17-year trophy drought. I get it. Nobody was more frustrated that we didn't win trophies than I was because I was the asshole in America, essentially pimping Spurs as the team that was better than Arsenal, that was better suited to make a run than Liverpool. And of course, Daniel Levy just did not have the guts to sack up. And especially once we got into the PSR era, that was out of the question. So from a financial standpoint and from a player acquisition point, totally understand it. But without Daniel Levy, without his stewardship, and without the model in which Spurs were operating, which was a self-sustainable model, Spurs would not have been in a position to leave White Hart Lane. And by the time we got into the 2010s, White Hart Lane was in bad condition. I understand, the nostalgia of White Hart Lane. I totally get it, man. I have the same nostalgia with certain buildings here in the United States. So I understand the nostalgia. But that being said, it was a relic by the time we hit 2010. And it was in desperate need of an upgrade. But more importantly, they weren't able to make money off of White Hart Lane. Let's just understand that. And without the self-sustainable model of maximizing revenue, this team does not get the state-of-the-art training ground. And this team sure as shit doesn't get the new stadium. Because I would probably assume that if it were another owner that appeased to the fan base, and I get it, right? Because there's a certain level of appeasement that you have to do because you're selling a product, you're selling football. So your lifeblood is season tickets, but that changed. That model changed right around 2000 to 2005 when the television money for the Premier League came in. And now all of a sudden TV rights started skyrocketing to the billions as the Premier League became the best league in the world. And make no mistake, the best league in the world is in England. Period, point blank. And we know this in the United States. And we know this because we don't give a shit about our domestic first league. The Premier League is the number one soccer league in the United States by a mile, followed by Liga MX and then Major League Soccer. That's how popular it is. It reaches our shores and everybody has a team. But as that happened, and the money became so much more important, and then merchandising became so much more important than ticket sales, the model flipped. The business model of running football teams flipped on its head, and the smartest ones were the ones that understand exactly what had happened and where the game was going. Because now it's not necessarily about wins and losses. If you're a good team, and Spurs were always a mid-table team anyway. I think the last time Spurs really, really were close to the relegation line last year, they were. I get it, man. We had 22 losses, finished 17th, but we were nowhere near the relegation line. We fit it like our place suggested it, but we weren't bad as those three teams. We were never going to go down. But prior to last season, I think the last time Spurs were ever really in a relegation scrap, I think I was like 12, 13 years old. I'm 43, so do the math. 30 years ago. Maybe a little over 30 years ago. I do remember, they had to get Jurgen Klinsmann at the January transfer window, and he saved them from going down. It's been that long. But that being said, Spurs were never going to be a team that were going to get relegated. And so from that standpoint, understanding that you have a team that you don't have to worry about relegation because, again, that self-sustainability was going to keep them right where they are. They were able to instill a model that was going to capitalize on revenue and maximize it for the place where they were playing it. And they did a phenomenal job. And it sucked that we had lost some of our best players. Gareth Bale, Luka Modric, Kyle Walker, Kieran Trippier, Harry Kane, all of them. It sucked to see them go. But that being said, because of that model, we were able to get a state-of-the-art training ground, and we were able to move into a brand new state-of-the-art stadium that everyone is jealous of. Because we were the one that enticed the NFL to come to London because of our stadium. And that revenue stream is going to pay for itself. Everybody wants that type of model. There's a reason why a lot of teams copy Spurs in that model. Because they never had to worry about PSR. They never had to worry about anything. And yeah, I understand it from the Levy out standpoint, because when you don't win a trophy in 17 years, it feels like it's a never ending. It feels like it's never ending, right? When you're only pumping 4% of your revenue into your transfer budget, and teams like Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal eclipse it on a regular, I can understand the frustration. Because at the end of the day, we're playing football, right? You're selling football. That is your product. And if you're not playing football to win, then what are we doing? Well, in Enix's case, they understood it. They understood the end game. The end game is not trophies, although with some clubs, trophies actually equal success. And what I mean by that is everybody wants to hitch their wagon to a winner. If you're consistently winning things, you will make money hand over fist because people like winners, right? Which is why Liverpool continues to maximize revenue, because they just win everything. Same thing with Man City. I get it. But that being said, if you're not one of those teams, if you're not one of those type of teams that have like state-owned, Saudi money or whatever the case may be, or you're not owned by a billionaire, hedge fund. But that being said, it is, if you're not one of those teams, man, you have to find advantages where there's disadvantages. And credit to Daniel Levy, because he's the one that did it. He's the one that did it. And he took Spurs from a team that was barely worth $80 million in 2000, 2001, and transformed it into one of the top 10 richest clubs in the world. The Cockerel is a synonymous brand globally. Period. You can go anywhere in the world. They did a great job marketing this club. And they were able to get revenue streams globally. And I get it, man. It sucks that we weren't able to take some of that money and invest it into the team. I get it. But that being said, to build a team to where it is today, and this summer was actually a pretty decent summer transfer window. I'll just say that. And it looks like that this thing has been built up to a point where I feel like maybe it could be something different. You get Charrington in as the new chairman. You got Vinny there. Paratici's coming back. It feels like it's a new era with Spurs. But that being said, I understand there's trepidation because the ownership is not going to sell. I get it. But that being said, it's like we're in a position now where, because our debt is essentially been written off for 30 years, like this team is ready to actually ready to compete. What that looks like, we don't know yet, because we just got through this one window. We don't know. But that being said, I think it's short-sighted for those that cheered to understand of what happened if that didn't happen. Ask yourself what happens if Enoch doesn't buy it in 2000, 2001, and who does Alan Sugar eventually sell it to? Another millionaire from England who might do what Leeds did in that time frame. Try to mortgage their future for short-term gains and then completely miss, and then find yourself in League One and have to work yourself back into the Premier League at a time where a lot of teams don't stay up anymore. Like the idea that you're going to be able to come right back up and have sustained success. Like, by the way, what Bournemouth did doesn't happen at all. Like, that was that's like the exception, not the rule. But let's go ahead and take a look at the chat real quick. We have Andrew Burnett. What's up, Andrew, man? Big up to you, sir. Good to see you. Let's see. Cootie scored, but off. Yeah, I know. I think Argentina's playing. Yeah, I know. Sean Johnson. Good to see you, Sean. Love Levy for what he built at Spurs, but he's taken us as far as he could. Yeah. Without a doubt, man. Listen, I think the height of it was over the course of the last 6 or 7 years. It was after. I think it was what was it after the Champions League run? We did absolutely nothing in the summer transfer window. We became the first team without actually a transfer embargo to not make a move in the summer transfer window. So yeah, like, I understand that. And then also the lip service where he said that moving into the new stadium is going to be able to allow us to compete on a bigger stage. And of course, those, instead of actually, getting the type of players that, say, your counterparts in the Premier League were getting, we had a never-ending revolving door of coaches. I get it. It was frustrating. But that being said, I think we're at a point now where we've been in the stadium for 5 years, 6 years now, and now we're kind of set in a financial situation where not only do we not have to worry about PSR anymore, but we're actually going to be able to compete now. I think the money is there. I would probably assume that there was an investment. I do. I think there had to have been an investment, because that's the only thing that makes sense. And of course, Levy probably spearheaded it. But that being said, I think the writing was on the wall. I don't think the 17th place had anything to do with it. I think that Levy was just tired. He's been doing it for 25 years. And I think he's publicly said that there was going to be a certain time where he was going to be done. We know that the Joe Louis Trust, the daughter, hates Levy's guts. And those two had been spotted at games recently. And of course, they brought in their own guy, Charrington. The Louis Trust brought in their own guy. So I think the writing was on the wall. Ever since Charrington actually was brought in, I thought the writing was on the wall for Levy. But that being said, also remember he's still a minority owner, so he's a part of the ownership group. He owns 20% of it. So that being said, he's not really going anywhere. He's just not chairman anymore. But that being said, I don't look at this as a failure for Tottenham Hotspur. His tenure was not a failure. Yeah, we only won two trophies. I get it. The trophy haul wasn't what we thought it was, right? Considering Spurs were that team that seemed to win at least a trophy a decade. That stopped after the early 2000s. But when you look at the business side of things and you look at the success that he had, he left us in a very good situation where the club, once the Louis Trust actually sells this club, holy shit. Only the best clubs in the world are going to be moved for like more than $5 billion, and Spurs are going to be one of them. And the only people that are going to be able to afford that type of this type of club are the ones that are just unbelievably like fucking billionaire rich, like oil money rich, that can afford to buy a team like this. And of course, when you buy a team like that, you're going to have smart people in charge that know how to cook the books, and you're going to try to compete for Champions Leagues. But that being said, that's cart before the horse. But the reality is, I look at this and I can't point to another time in Spurs history. This is going back, back to Bill Nick and Fred Behrman when that owner hired Bill Nick and they win a double. Different times, I understand, but there has been no ownership group that has done more for this team financially than Enoch and Daniel Levy. Period, point blank, man. Let's see. He says Richie is a sub tonight. Yeah, he's playing for Brazil. Yep. They were 0-7 before the internet. Let's see. Oh yeah, we're 0-7 before the. I don't give a shit about the record before the break, man. Shit happens. Bournemouth is actually a really good team. All right, so Tottenham, where Levy left us, is a club ready to explode. Imagine if we sign a world-class winger and a left center back in January, we'll have a team ready to compete all four fronts. Yeah, and that's what it's shaping up to be. I read a club statement where Daniel Levy said that essentially they would only make deals if something dropped into their lap, but they're looking forward to the January window. And I would probably assume that they're going to get all their ducks in a row for January, because I would probably assume that they're going to be in the FA Cup by then. They'll still be in the FA Cup, depending on how their league phase of the Champions League goes down. They're going to be. I'm expecting them to be in the knockout rounds. Their Champions League phase is fucking beautiful. God, it's such a cupcake walk through the league phase. But that being said, I also expect them to be within striking distance of top four. And if they get their January window right, sky's the limit. Now, do I think they are going to win the Champions League? Maybe not. But what they're going to end up doing is putting themselves in a position where they might be able to get back into the Champions League. And they're going to be able to set themselves up for what I would consider as it's going to be a historical transfer window in the summer of 2026. That's where I feel like this thing is headed to. But if I'm, yeah, I get my opinion is not a popular one, because you're supposed to be Levy out. But as somebody that understands the business of sports, you had to have seen exactly where football was going, in the direction it was going, right? Because a lot of Premier League teams are either, like with Liverpool, the Fenway Sports Group, they own the Boston Red Sox. And so they're a major owner in a major professional American sport that understands how the business American sports work. And that was the idea, to bring that model to the Premier League with Liverpool, and they've succeeded on all fronts. You look at the relationship between Daniel Levy and the NFL, and what he was able to do with Tottenham Hotspur follows the American sporting model. It's self-sustainability, the ability to maximize revenue in a stadium where that is not necessarily conducive to it, right? And credit to Daniel Levy, he made money at White Hart Lane. A stadium that was literally falling down. That was the wear and tear by 2010, 2015, and he got a new building built. It's unreal, man. It's unreal. In a city like London, where the property value is absolutely crazy ass high, he got a $1 billion stadium built. It's unbelievable, man. Let's see. Also, a lot of people are sleeping on Mason Melia. Yes, he is. Yeah, he's coming in January, and he has the potential to, he definitely has the potential to develop into something special. But again, man, when I look at this team from its core, and I see guys that the bulk of this team that are anywhere between 22 and 24, with a few exceptions, and you look at the players that came in over the summer, and this team actually looks kind of fun, with a manager that's going to exactly know how to produce results. This season has a potential to be unbelievably fun. But that being said, man, when I heard the news, and by the way, let's get into the statement today. The club's. This is what Daniel Levy said. I'm incredibly proud of the work that I've done together with the executive team and all our employees. We have built this club into a global heavyweight, competing at the highest level. More than that, we have built a community. I was lucky enough to work with some of the greatest people in the sport, from the team in the Lily White House and Hotspur Way, all to the players and managers over the years. I wish to thank all the fans that have supported me over the years. It hasn't been an easy journey, but significant progress has been made, and I will continue to support this club passionately. Good statement. Good statement. Very corporate, I'll say that. But he's right, though. He's right about one thing. Spurs are a global heavyweight. They really are. When you take a look at the Deloitte Money League and you see where Spurs are ranked, I think they're 8th in the Deloitte Money League. This team prints its own money. That doesn't happen. That does not happen especially in the Premier League. Like, unless you are owned by a state-run dictatorship or whatever, and have the backing of like a Saudi investment fund. You don't print money, right? You are subject to the stadium in which you play, and the revenue in which you are able to make out of that, plus your ticket sales, and of course, the TV money, which is a huge boost. But that being said, you are a product of the stadium in which you play, which is why Brentford had to build a new stadium. That's why Everton built a new stadium, because they were handcuffed by Goodison Park. And it's the same reason why Spurs built, the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, because they had no choice. They had to adapt. But you're also talking about a dude who understood real estate, and was able to get a massive stadium built in a city that is expensive as hell to build in. But that being said, I remember, and this is the testament, right? This is the testament. So A lot of you guys don't know how I became a Spurs fan, and I'm going to tell you right now. It was 2000, 2001. And my brother was an Arsenal fan, still is. And I hated Arsenal. I didn't like Arsene Wenger. I didn't like the colors. Now, mind you, the only football that I watched prior to that, like my club team was the U.S. men's national team. So when I watched soccer, it was literally just my national team. And then I would go out on, like around 2000, 2001, I would go out on, Friday night, Saturday night with my brother. And in the morning, because they had 12 o'clock starts in the UK, he would have to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch Arsenal. And so he woke me up a few times and I would watch Arsenal. And I hated Arsenal. I didn't like Highbury. Didn't like Thierry Henry. Didn't like any of those dudes, man. And I remember Googling, or not, well, pre-Google, so it was whatever search engine was at the time, Ask Jeeves or whatever the hell it was. And I just typed in, Arsenal's biggest rival, and it was Tottenham Hotspur. And I started watching videos, and that's how I became a Spurs fan. And I like the crest. I like the colors. I like the players. And the interesting thing is that back in those days, if you tried to talk to any American about Tottenham Hotspur, they had no idea what it was, where they played. They wouldn't even realize that you were talking about soccer. 25 years later, and you ask a random American soccer fan in the United States about Tottenham Hotspur, chances are you're running into a fellow Spurs fan. That is the power of what Daniel Levy was able to build at N17, and I think that is the most underrated quality, and nobody talks about it, is the fact that you can go to Asia, and a lot of it had to do with, by the way, and a lot of that had to do with Sonny, but again, that's part of the marketing genius. But you can go to Asia, and people will know who Tottenham Hotspur is. Because of Ange Postecoglou, you can go to Australia and they know who Spurs are, right? So it was, at one point it was just contained to England. That is the genius of a guy like Daniel Levy, and he's turned Spurs into a global heavyweight. Sean Johnston, our revenues now are some of the strongest in the world, with new power brokers at the top of the club. Let's be brave and sprinkle some real quality. Yeah. Like, let me ask you a question, Sean. Let me ask you this question real quick, man. And thanks for stopping by tonight, man. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Let me ask you a question real quick. So now that we have a new chairman, and it feels like there's going to be a new era now, where summer windows will be maximized, and it feels like we have a core in place to build in which to build upon. Within the next 5 years, do you think we go trophyless, or do you think that we lift a couple trophies? Curious. I'm curious about how because I look at this team and I actually think it's a strong team already. And with Xavi Simons coming in through the door, which was a beautiful piece of transfer business, by the way. With Xavi Simons coming in, and the fact that we're going to get Kulusevski back in a few months, James Maddison should be back next year, and now all of a sudden the 10 position, which goes from one of our weakest, it's going to end up being one of our strongest. And yeah, if we get a quality left winger in and another striker, let's be real here. A duct tape Richie is our starting striker right now. A guy that's held together by duct tape and glue. That's our starting striker. And Dominic Solanke, who may or may not be able to play at this kind of level. Yes, we need another left back. Yes, we need another left center back. Of course we do. We'll probably get that in the winter window. But the reality is, like, imagine if next summer we get a world-class striker, left winger, adding to Kudus, adding to Xavi Simons, adding to Polinia, adding to Sarr, adding to the center back pairing, which is probably one of the best in the Premier League. And all of a sudden, you look at that starting 11 and we're ready to hit the ground running. We definitely win trophies, without a doubt, because all of a sudden now our depth is, which was maybe arguably one of our weakest aspects. Then all of a sudden it becomes an actual asset now. We actually have depth. And it's going to allow Wilson Odebear to develop into a quality winger, potentially even Matisse Tell. It's going to allow Archie Gray time to develop as a 6, with Lucas Bergvall to develop into the type of high roaming box to box 8/10 that he probably is. Right? It's going to allow Kevin Danso to get better, Luka Vuskovic to get better. Damn, like imagine what this club would look like with Anthony Robinson back. Holy shit. By the way, if they went out and got Christian Pulisic and Anthony Robinson, now selfishly, because obviously I got an American flag behind my shoulder here. If they got America's best 2 players, I'd be over the moon, but I digress. All right, so we're like a couple 32 minutes in, but yeah, I look at this and I take the opposite approach, man. I really do. I take the opposite approach to Enoch, and Daniel Levy. I really do. I don't look at the 25 years as a failure because we only won 2 trophies. I don't look at it as a failure because you have to understand exactly what these people look at as success. What is success? Is it trophies? Can you measure your success by trophies? Yes, for some clubs you can, but for others, where you have turned your business from what it was worth into a damn near $4 billion company. Dude, that's success. And you have a stadium and a training ground that is the envy of the Premier League and teams that are trying to copy your model. That's success. And yes, it helps to have trophies, and I'm glad we won one, but our first levy with Xavi, Kudus, and Colomani is very exciting. I don't know. Listen, Xavi and Kudus are dope. Kolo Muani, it depends, man. It depends on. So, all right. So I got this thing about Kolo Muani. And mind you, he was great for France in the World Cups. But that being said, couldn't necessarily hang with PSG. And I get it, right? Because they had Kylian Mbappe. I understand, man. But that being said, it's like they moved him off position and he still couldn't hang. Finally gets a move to Juventus, and it's Juventus, right? Clearly he's got talent. He hit the ground running with Juventus. Clearly he's got talent. But the Premier League is a different animal. But that being said, he's got Champions League experience. Like the dude's played in World Cups, right? So he knows how to go up against good talent. The question is like, where do you start him? Is he a starting striker? Potentially. But that being said, considering our weaknesses on the left, and you're not going to move Xavi Simons out of the 10, right? Like that dude walks into the 11 at the 10. But Kolo Muani, like if you play narrow, like let's say you play a 4-2-3-1 narrow, okay, and you got him playing like Pochettino used to play, son, where you had inverted runs to the post, and you actually allow Kolo Muani to essentially play like as an off striker from the left side, where in the buildup, maybe you can have him cut in off the left side onto his right foot, or you just literally have him, crashing the channels between the right back and the right center back. Yeah, like Kolo Muani can finish. And I would probably think like what would be acceptable for him this season is like if he has like 20 goal involvements over the course of the season. To me, that like we have to have a 20 goal score somewhere this year. That's what I'm expecting from Kolo Muani. Anything less would be disappointing as far as I'm concerned. Look at the goals last season. Yeah, see, but let's okay. Here's the thing. Yes, Serie A is a good league. Very disciplined, very defensive league. That means you have to have strikers with skill. But outside of both Milan teams, Napoli, I wouldn't even put Atalanta up there, but Napoli, Roma, and Roma has kind of hit the skids a little bit. Serie A is kind of a top-heavy league now. La Liga is I think La Liga is probably, okay, so like if I was to rank the top 5 leagues in Europe, Premier League 1, La Liga 2, Bundesliga 3, although you can probably flip-flop those two, Serie A 4, Liga 1 5. And that's what Kolo Muani was doing it in. Probably the 4th best of the Power 5 in Europe. And it's a top-heavy league. Again, good defense, good defensive league, very disciplined league, very tactically sound league. So I'm not taking anything away from Kolo Muani, what he did on loan with Juventus, but can he do it in the Premier League? Can he hit the ground running for Spurs in the Premier League? Now, the good news is you look at the schedule for the next month and a half, 2 months, yeah, like he has a very good opportunity to come in and hit the ground running because the schedule is light before November 1st. All right, so we're kind of pushing 40 minutes now, but I guess to recap, this one, I look at Daniel Levy's tenure as chairman as a success. And yeah, I realize that, his success to a lot of fans meant player acquisitions and trophies. Because at the end of the day, it's a football club. And if you're not playing to win, then what are you doing? But that being said, I also have to point out that football became a business when the money became serious. That's when the entire business of football flipped on a dime. And those that were still operating like it was in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even in the 2000s, were going to get left behind. It took a different style of businessman to understand the mechanism in which teams are built and teams make money. And Daniel Levy was the perfect chairman for Spurs at the perfect time. It's true. It's true. Yeah. And because of it, Spurs went from a mid-table, mediocre side into a continuously top 4 Champions League team that can routinely qualify for the Champions League. That, in the 2010s, we're putting up some of the best points totals this team has ever seen. I get it, man. They didn't win anything, but still, you look at the trajectory of this club and you look at the fact that because of their revenue now, they're miles away from PSR. Dude, they can spend $500 million in a window and not even blink because they have done such a good job putting themselves in a position where that will never be an issue. Never be an issue. And I think that's a testament to the people that were stewards of the club. They were fiscally responsible. So I get it, man. I wish we would have seen more trophies, but what's interesting about it is, like in the 80s, I think Spurs. I think the Spurs. Let's look. Give me 1 second, real quick. All right. All right. So, like, you think of let's just go. All right. So, in their history, they have 2 first division titles, 51 and 61. Okay. So they were never really at the type of team to win the first division. Okay. They won the FA Cup in 01. Then it was another 20 years between FA Cups. Then it was another 40 years between FA Cups. They won it back to back in 61, 62. They won 3 times in the 60s, but then they won it in 81, 82, and then a UEFA Cup. They won the UEFA Cup in 84. They won the UEFA Cup in 72 and 84, and they won it last year. But the reality is like this team was always kind of like I'll win a trophy. They win trophies at the beginning of the decade, and then they win one at the end of the decade. That's it. In the 80s, it was like, 81, 82, 84. And they didn't win another FA Cup until 91. And then they didn't win another trophy until 99. And then it was another 10 years, right? So historically, this team doesn't win a lot of trophies to begin with anyways. Right? Let's just kind of keep it honest with each other, right? Yeah, we won big trophies, but we haven't had that type of sustained period of success like the 1960s and into the 70s, right? Like that, that 10 years between like 61 and actually let's keep it real, like 61 to 74, where they had their most trophy hauls. But now you're looking at it, we're in the PSR era now where you saw what happened to Bournemouth. You saw what happened to Fulham. You saw what happened to Everton, and I understand. But again, those guys and Wolves, but those guys are victims of the stadiums in which they play. Until they actually move, and Everton did. Congratulations. But until a lot of these teams realize that in order for them to actually put themselves in breathing room where PSR is not an issue, they absolutely have to move into new stadiums. Credit to Brentford, they realized it and they did it. What do you think about a cut price bid for Gahey in January? Let's see. I don't think Gahey wants to come to Spurs. If I'm perfectly honest, right? Going to Liverpool, he's going to take the position of Konate and move right into the starting 11. Facts. He comes to Tottenham Hotspur, and the only way that he gets into the starting 11 is if we go to a back three. Otherwise, he's going to be in rotation. And I don't think he comes to Spurs to be in rotation. He feels like he thinks of himself as a starting center back in the league, and as he is. I just don't think that he's certainly not taking Romero's spot, and he's certainly not taking Van de Ven's spot. Unless one of those guys catch a long injury, like in December, and are out for like 2 or 3 months, I seriously doubt Gahey becomes somebody that wants to come here. Yeah, no, so here's the thing, man. I get it. 2 trophies in 25 years is simply not good enough. That's why Levy got the push. I don't think Levy got pushed out the door. I think this was a long time coming. I think Levy has been exhausted with this job for the last 5 years. And he's publicly talked about the stress of running a club. Like, I believe that. Now, what I will say is that for the Lewis Trust, 25 years is a long time to be in one position. And I think they recognize his contributions to the club. And I think they even appreciate it, because without Daniel, the Spurs are not where they are right now. I do agree with you, though, that it's not good enough, right? But that being said, in order for Spurs to put themselves in a position to consistently win, they're going to have to do things that make them uncomfortable. Ali Gold and Matt Law both said tonight that Levy was pushed out. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know for a fact that Lewis's daughter hates his guts, and I know that they brought in Sherrington, and so from that standpoint, yeah, probably wouldn't surprise me. I know that him and Lewis's daughter absolutely cannot get along at all, and so I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually the case. But I also know that Levy had an end date too. Maybe somebody else made that decision for him. Fair enough. I would be curious to know exactly what the losses were last year in that season. A 17th place finish that ended in a trophy, but I would be curious to see what those offset losses were last year and whether or not that actually had something to do with it. I'd be curious. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, guys. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. And the way that I look at it is that from the business side of things, Levy was probably the best chairman in Spurs history, probably. But yeah, there was a lack of there was definitely a lack of trophies in the cabinet case, and I think that also, and then also when you look at the change for Tottenham protest, I'm sure that didn't help either. So from that standpoint, yeah, man. I wish Daniel Levy the best in the future. His future endeavors. I hope he lands. I'm sure he will land fine. He's still a 20% owner in Tottenham Hotspur, so I'm sure he's going to be all right. But that's going to do it for me. I do want to thank Sean Johnson for stopping in the chat tonight. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. And thanks to Andrew Burnett and everybody that tuned in tonight. It's fun talking about this. Tomorrow we are back talking about on the stateside footy side. We are talking about the Seattle Sounders and their League Cup run and their win and the historic trophy that they ended up winning this last week. With Jeff Legason of Prost International. He will be on tomorrow to talk a little bit about it and a little bit about the U.S. men's national team. On Saturday, we have the U.S. men's national team watch along as they host South Korea from Paterson, New Jersey, Red Bull Arena. It's going to be an interesting match, to say the most, as Pochettino continues to get this team ready for World Cup 2026. So that's coming down on Saturday. And I'm sure we're going to be back on Sunday discussing Spurs again. But that being said, also on, I believe on Friday, I will also be on Spurs Diehards TTID. So that should be fun. Thank you guys a bunch tonight. Again, make sure you hit your like and subscribe buttons, man. And I hope you guys have a great weekend. And I hope you guys enjoy yourself. Have a great night, guys.